lots of gear. We're here at the House of Blues in Las Vegas, where we start our tour tomorrow night. We're here for a production day, so we get to come in and set up all the gear, and it's kind of our first chance to kind of see the show as a full package. You know, we've been rehearsing for the past week on just the music in another location. Now we get to see what it looks like with the full light package laid out on stage with a full PA. Kind of gives us a chance to get everything dialed in before the tour starts tomorrow. Just give you guys a little bit of a time lapse of the setup of our God Rack over here, our guitar vaults that we're borrowing from our good friends at Census Fail. And then in a second here, I'll give you an in-depth look at the God Rack. All right, God Rig rundown time finally here. Big case, lots of stuff going on, but honestly, pretty straightforward. Along our left side here, we'll start at the top. Just a drawer, keep a bunch of odds and ends in, tape, all the cable that comes out of here, wraps up and goes in this drawer every day. Then we'll come down to our first Quad Cortex rig, and these are all three of these here are basically the same thing. Jim's is slightly different, it's just missing one component that we have in the others, because we didn't feel like we needed it for this. But these racks are something that I spent a lot of time with Brad at BTPA kind of dreaming up and figuring out the best case scenario here. My main concern was that I wanted to have a completely redundant rig that was passing the instrument signal and MIDI 2 at all times, and in an absolute nightmare scenario, you could press one button and switch from our main to our backup. Luckily, those types of emergencies have not really happened to us. I'm going to go ahead and knock on some wood here. But these have been pretty rock solid. So essentially what we've got going on here is just two drawers, one Quad Cortex each. They've got the Tronics DC7 power units back there powering each quad. And I believe the top drawer in each is also powering all of the stuff in the top shelf here. That includes the radial hotshot, I believe. Is that what it's called? I think it's the hotshot, right? The radial hotshot ABY switch, which we run in Y mode. So our guitar signals from our wireless come in this rack over here, and cabling in the back brings it over into the hotshot, splits it out down to both Quad Cortexes. So they are both getting instrument signal at all times. And then we also have this MIDI solutions, I believe it's a quadra through, so it basically takes one signal in, splits it out, duplicates it over 4 outputs. So that's taking our MIDI from playback up here, comes into this rack, splits to both Quad Cortexes at the same time, so all of our Quad Cortexes are synced up together, they're switching patches at the same time. So in the scenario, if we ever have to switch to the backup, it's going to be synced up to our playback on the right patch at all times. And as you see down here, we have these Voodoo Lab switchers, which can be switched with MIDI controllers. It's something we haven't really used. We have the option to have an external MIDI controller over with Nick, our guitar tech, if you ever need to switch from far away. But typically, as you see here today, as is most days, he's pretty much always set up right next to it. So he can just press the AB button here to switch in an absolute emergency. And this radial backtrack here for Jim is essentially doing the same thing, which is also in the racks for me and Zach, which you can't really see at the back there. That's right back here. But yeah, outputs from both Quad Cortexes go into the backtrack, and it has 2 sets of inputs, stereo left and right, and then 1 stereo output, and you can switch which input is going to the output. And when we press this AV button here, you can see back there, it's just switching AB on the backtrack. So yeah, one more time, the signal flow is instrument wireless to the radial hotshot back there, running in Y mode, into the inputs of the quad cortexes, playback, MIDI, coming into each rack, which then hits a MIDI solutions quadra through, splits out into both quad cortexes. Outputs of the quad cortexes go into these radial backtracks. For Jim's, it just stops at the backtrack and then goes to the output of the rack. For me and Zach, the backtracks are being controlled by these Voodoo Labs control switchers. On the right side here, we'll start all the way at the top with our playback rack. We rely pretty heavily on the iConnectivity stuff, which is really awesome. They're pretty much the only purpose-built interfaces for live use. Their interfaces don't have inputs because you typically don't need them for live use. We're just looking for outputs. So what we're using here is the Play Audio 12. This is our main interface. This gives us 12 outputs from Ableton over here, and it's fully redundant. So you see that there are 2 USB inputs here, each one going to one of our playback computers over here. So if the drone signal coming out of the A playback computer ever drops for even, I believe it's set for 2 milliseconds, it automatically switches to the B computer and our show can keep going without anything dropping out. And honestly, it's pretty seamless. I've even tested just switching it back and forth with this little button here while we were playing to see if you can notice a difference, and the switch is so fast and pretty transparent, so it's really awesome. And then from here, this is taking all of our MIDI information in the playback session, sending it out over an Ethernet cable into the switch, which distributes it elsewhere. So one line is tied in here to this Mio XM, which is then sending it out of normal MIDI DIN ports over to the quad cortex racks. And then one of these is sending MIDI over to this C computer, which is controlling this Universal Audio Apollo X4, which we use for a little bit of vocal processing, compression, lo-fi effects. So it's just strictly just vocal processing. But doing it this way means that no matter which computer we're running off of, there's always MIDI going to our C computer up here. So if the A computer drops out, the B computer is still making all the changes for us. Moving down from our playback rack, as I already showed you a little bit earlier, this is our instrument and vocal mic wireless rack. We are Sennheiser artists. We really, truly believe in pretty much everything they make. They're always rock solid. We've used them pretty much all over the world at this point and never had any issues. So we're using the G4 EW100 instrument wireless systems, and I believe this is also an EW1 G4 vocal mic wireless unit. Yeah, they just get the job done. They join up in this antenna splitter, so they're all being powered off of this antenna splitter, which allows us to be able to use this antenna right over here for all the units at one time. And then we'll come down here. These are our in-ear units. These are also Sennheiser G4. 4 of them are being powered from one combiner. The other 2 are being powered from this separate combiner over here. And once again, they're all going out to a single antenna right here, this big helical RF venue guy. And everybody in the band gets their own mix. As you can see, we have one for Andrew, Jim, me, Vigil, Zach, and then a tech or crew mix. So everybody gets full control over what they're getting in their ears every day. Super flexible for everyone. We use this Allen & Heath SQ5 mixer to dial in the mixes. And then just below that, we have the newest addition to this setup, along with the SQ5, is this Allen & Heath GX4816 stage box, which we had our very good friends at BTPA build into this rack with a split for us. And basically every single thing that makes a sound on this stage is plugged into this. Now, all of these lines stay patched in, and they're built into the split on the back of this that I'll show you in a second. The split essentially allows us to plug every line in, have it go both to our in-ears and then out to front of house separately, so that front of house can have their own control over what they're doing with the processing of all the signals, separate from what we do here for our in-ears. Just below that, we've got a rack that BTPA built for us for Andrew's trigger. His lines for the trigger come from his snake at the drums. Hit the back of this rack. Trigger hits here, the Roland TM2 goes into this radial J48 direct box, and then out up into this stage box up here. And then this down here is just a glorified power strip, but it is a battery backup system. so that we are not tied into the power coming from house. It both serves as a fail-safe if power ever drops out. The main thing is that with everything plugged into this, it's all running on the same circuit, and that circuit is the battery inside of here, not the power from the venue. So we don't have to worry about ground hum issues. Okay, we're at the back now. And as you can see, pretty much everything has an I/O panel. We are still in rebuilding mode from the Latin America tour we did earlier this year, so it's a little bit more of a mess than it typically is, and it will get tidied up as the tour goes on. But just give you a look at everything that's going on here. So, start with the playback rack up here at the top. This multi-pin takes every output from this rack, which will be our 12 channels of playback, which we're not using all of, but we do have the option with this multi-pin cable. And then all of the outputs from the Apollo X4, takes it down through one cable, splits out into 16 XLRs down here at the stage box, and plugs into the stage box. And then we've got inputs for vocal mics going to the Apollo right here. Our MIDI outputs that come over to the Quad Cortexes. USB cables that go to the laptops. This is our MIDI for the C computer that goes over the Ethernet cable. And then we just do an Ethernet to USB-C cable up here. And then our PowerCon cable. And every day when we pack this up, we pull all this stuff off, pack it in the back of this rack here, and close it up. The whole point of this type of build is just to be as efficient as possible, to be able to set up and tear down as quickly as possible, and make everybody's lives a little bit easier. So moving down below to the back of the RF rack, we've got the instrument outs from the instrument wireless going over to our respective Quad Cortex racks. Vigil's wireless mic going up here for vocal processing. These are our BNC antennas out. This one specifically is for the instrument wireless, again going to this RF venue antenna right there, the one that looks like a fin. And then another PowerCon. Again, this is another multi-pin cable. This is taking all of the outputs from the stage box up here to our in-ear rack and splits it off to everybody's specific unit. So that's just the easiest way to not have to patch in 16 different XLRs every day. It just goes directly over one multi-pin cable. And then again, another antenna one goes out to that bigger antenna right there. Okay, here is the messiest part. We've tried to do our best as far as organizing this, but it is really hard when you've got so many inputs here. So this is the back of that stage box that I said was our split. This is where every single signal on the stage comes in and then splits off either to our front of house engineer out front or our in-ear rack. Every cable gets plugged in, splits off either through this cable here that goes over to our console for ears, or out through this giant 150 pin multi-pin cable to the front of house stage box right over here. It's a bit of a mess, but most of this stuff stays plugged in every day. When we pull the back of this case off, we really just have to plug in the downstage, which would be this blue cable here. I'll go out and show you on stage in a second. We need to plug the tails of that in every day, which is just the vocal mics at the front of the stage, and this big multi-pin guy, and our show can run almost immediately. You know, the rest of this rat's nest pretty much stays in at all times. And I probably could have organized this a little bit better before this video, but this is just the true reality of what we're running with here. Like I said, we're in rebuilding mode from Latin America, and at some point in this tour, we'll have some extra time to kind of tidy things up. But we were in a situation of needing to rehearse, and that was a little bit more important than getting cables fixed. So we'll get there eventually. Down here is the drum trigger rack. We have the inputs for the drum triggers right there. The output from the DI box into the stage rack right there. I'll show you the back of our Quad Cortex rigs now. Everybody's got the same I/O panel in the back of their rig. So we've got input, left to right output, MIDI in, MIDI through 2, which we don't use, USB for the main and the spare, which we typically don't use since everything can be done over Wi-Fi. Expression pedal 1, expression pedal 2 for our main and spare as it's labeled, which we do use for Jim and Zach, and I will show you that in a second. Tuner power sends power for a Boss TU, or actually no, it sends power to a Peterson Strobo Stomp now over an XLR cable. Tuner is the tuner output from the Radial Hotshot, or Big Shot, whatever it is. I can't remember which one it is ever. so that the tuners on stage can be on at all times. And we use the expression pedals to mute the outputs of the quad cortexes. And again, it's the same thing down here for Zach. Same exact outputs, I/O panel. And then down here for me, since I'm running an Evertune, I don't need the expression outputs. I don't have to tune on stage. So we actually just taped over those so they can't be plugged in by accident. And we're just using the instrument in and stereo outputs and MIDI in for mine. And then here is one of our pedal boards we put on the stage for Zach and Jim. Just runs to a tuner. The strobo stop is on at all times. Like I said, that power is being sent over an XLR cable. And then we use these Mission, I believe they're called the 25K or something like that. It's a Mission expression pedal that has 2 outputs, so it can send expression signal to the main and spare quad cortexes at the same time. We run out of the tuner output on the radial ABY switches, goes into the tuner input here, so that's always sending signal to the tuner. And then the expression pedal 1 and 2 control the output volume of the main and spare quad cortexes, so the tuner can always be on, and if they need to tune, they just turn the pedal down, and that mutes the outputs of the quad cortex. When they're done tuning, volume back up. Super simple. And then we have, unfortunately for guitar tech Nick, 100 or 150 foot looms he has to run every day for Zach and Jim. But yeah, it's been extremely useful for us. We can put the pedals for them anywhere on the stage, and they have full control over the outputs of the quad cortexes and are able to tune whenever they need to. Then we'll come over here and give you a little bit of a look at the rest of the rig back here for Guitar World. This is Nick's workstation here. Got some tools up there, magnets, another Peterson strobo tuner, and then just miscellaneous tools, pickup, supplies, all sorts of goodies. And then our very good friends in Census Fail lent us this guitar vault for this tour, since we have about a bajillion guitars on this tour, it feels like. And in another video, I will do a rundown of all the guitars that everybody brought out with them. And then Nick painstakingly put together all these custom pack of strings, because all of our string sets are custom single strings that we ordered to make sure we have perfect tension on all the guitars for our different tunings we play in. So he went through and all of these single gauges, organized them out by gauge or in some of the guitar string scenarios, put together actual packs that started out as just single string sets. So he did a bunch of organizational work, got himself set up for success on this tour, and then got all of our bags of Dunlop picks in here. So we're all sorts of set up for this tour. Yeah, so we spent a ton of time really trying to dial in that rig as far as the design goes. I don't want to toot mine or Brad's horn too much, but I feel like we're starting to see a lot of rigs built out with the Quad Cortex in a similar way with the redundant setup, which is kind of cool, both because I love seeing more Quad Cortexes out in the wild, because I really believe in the unit. I think it's a really awesome unit that they're only continuing to really improve and add a lot of value to. But, you know, we were pretty early to that kind of design, and a lot of it came from some issues we had with our previous rig with Kempers that I really wanted to avoid. Like I said, I really wanted to have redundant input to the Quad Cortexes, redundant MIDI to the Quad Cortexes, so that it truly was a fully redundant rig with just one single button to flip to our backup. And Brad has actually kind of refined on that even more for some similar builds that he's done since then, where the ABY switch can actually be switched via MIDI now as well, which is really awesome. We unfortunately, we kind of worked this build out at the tail end of the pandemic when there was a lot of supply chain issues, and we didn't have access to some of the components that he's able to get now for newer builds. So we kind of worked with what was available to us at the time. And honestly, at this point for us, this has worked pretty much perfect, and I wouldn't change anything, actually. So these have been kind of my dream rig, and we keep making small, fine refinements along the way, but I don't see us changing from this rig for the foreseeable future. You know, with Neural DSP being the awesome company they are, and kind of pushing out regular updates for the Quad Cortex. You know, as the needs of our band kind of evolve, the unit itself seems to be evolving with us. So, you know, unless something drastic changes here in the future, which I don't foresee, like the Quad Cortex kind of just covers every scenario we could possibly need that I can currently think of. If you have any questions that I didn't cover in this, go ahead and drop it in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to you with any details that I may have left out. And I also just want to give a huge shout out to the companies that helped make that a reality for us. So a huge shout out to Neural DSP, first and foremost, for making what I think is the most flexible and in my opinion, and again, this is all subjective, but in my opinion, the best sounding amp modeler out there. And then as well as radio for the ABY switches and the backtrack redundant output system. And then our friend Brad and everyone at BTPA for building all of the racks for us. You know, it's important for the gear to work properly, right? But then for it to be built in a way that we can use the gear really effectively and really efficiently. Like a lot of that came down to Brad figuring out how to rack everything up and wire everything in for us. So that's just a couple cables that we plug in every day. So huge shout out to Brad to doing that for us. And also putting up with me kind of obsessing over every worst case scenario I could imagine to make sure that we had every single possibility covered within this rig. And then our good friend Rob at JustinCase for building our God rack for us. You know, we were rolling with these, just the bare racks for a while, but then in that case, we were in fact plugging in every single cable every day. So we brought the idea that we kind of borrowed from our friend Shelby in the band Wage War. We brought the idea of this giant case to Rob, and he crushed it. Now we can live with 75 to 90% of our cabling plugged in at all times, and it's cut down our workload massively. And of course, how could I forget Sennheiser for the best wireless products and microphones on the planet. If you have anything else, like I said, that you would want to see, some kind of behind the scenes stuff, if there's anything like that you want to see, definitely let me know. And there will be more videos coming. Please like and subscribe. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you guys in the next one.